Behold Jerusalem. Found. The Zodiacal Miracle in the Map of Britain and Northern Ireland and its Message for Our Time. By Graham K. Griffiths. Chapter 8 Gemini Part 1. Beneath the streets of Liverpool, the face of the Christ child. The chief of 13 gold and silver idols, bowed its head westwards, for its face was from the south, and 12 other images can be seen to this day half buried in the earth. St. Patrick, relating what he saw on approaching the shores of Britain. General area, its upraised arm has Chester for an elbow. Preston marks the back of the head, whilst Kidderminster on the foot marks its most southerly point. Liverpool is its face. Deep and near untranslatable emotions, aligned to an immense sense of calm, always bubble up in me whenever I contemplate this child's astonishing and fragile beauty. It's the small tender heart of Albion's otherwise mighty array of power and purpose. And yet I have a feeling that, if this little one does not open its eyes at the core of each of us, then this entire spectacle will have been in vain. In a nutshell, this child is the icon of the potential that I must call Christ consciousness realized in a man, and yet the title is, in itself, joyfully free of any one religious dogma. It is rather an embracing of the essence of many, from the beliefs of the indigenous North American to those of the Egyptian 6,500 years ago, a concentrated droplet of the universal truth which is God. Therefore, if you would prefer, just call it simply enlightenment, or even a heightened awareness of the God within, or whatever else you feel comfortable with. Either way, it already lies dormant in us all, from the beggar beseeching in Bombay to the baritone barreling his chest in Budapest. We are all primed with the consciousness of a Shiva, of a Buddha, of a Christ, of the highest state of knowing possible, and in this sleeping fetus of Albion that latent potential has been fragilely sculpted. But look, its eyes are tightly closed. So what is it to be? Do they remain shut? The whole universe hangs upon the answer. Give it birth it with eyes open and join a revolution in the perception of our existence, see heaven in the palm of your hand. But if we abort it down the back streets of ignorance and fear, such blindness will assuredly lead to a point where the earth can no longer healthily regenerate herself. We must already be very near to this point of no return, otherwise why this screaming miracle beneath our feet? Once again here is another figure whose shape and pose is so incredibly akin to its twin image at Glastonbury, where there is another baby with one distinctively bent and upraised arm. Looking at Albion's child, it is as though it has fallen asleep after sucking its thumb. Indeed, the more you look, the more the whole pose seems to be that of an unborn babe still safe and floating within the womb. However, as with any baby, it cannot stay in there forever, as much as it would like to, and this one must be born, for the very continuance of the human race may depend upon it. So suggests this writing on the walls of Albion, if I have read it correctly. And Liverpool shall bear either its smile or its grimace. Perceptive Mary Kane pointed out that near the knee of the Glastonbury babe there is a place called Livermore which, she suggests, is a sign of the bleeding Christ, the bleeding God, man who is still yet to realize his own true potential. She also saw it standing for Christ the liver, the lover of life. So with Mary's thoughts in mind, see which city just happens to fill the entire face of this great zodiac's own babe it is, and I think could only ever be, Liverpool, the pool of life, the Christ lives. Hence it is Liverpool that is the potentially life-illuminating wide-eyed smile of this Christ child in waiting. By now you should know that I read only pictures, and whether I read correctly is up to you. Even I have doubts as to my interpretations. But what I do know is that when I see that no other city in Albion dominates the face of any of the other giants as Liverpool dominates the face of this child, I cannot but feel obliged to put my ear to what this city may be crying out in its sleep. In its character and psyche, in its streets and happy Friday night faces, there might just be a subtle whispered word coming from the lips of this awakening child in the unplumbed scary depths of us all. So let us put our ear to the ground of this most individualistic of cities. A word of advice, though only intuitively can we ever expect to hear anything here. Only by trying to tap into the unique psyche of this city may we have any of gleaning the inner nature of the sleeping Christ child, that it hides just behind the mask of its noisy and bustling face. Cursory though my knowledge of Liverpool, and indeed of astrology, is, I nevertheless really do sense this city's nature to be most perfectly Geminian. Possibly more than any other city in England, it is a place of split personalities, the mere city of two very definite faces, one lined with laughter and friendliness while the other touched with pain and suffering. These seem to me to be the traditional astrological traits of true Geminians. And while we talk agony and ecstasy, have you ever known a birth that does not attract to itself these very same emotions? The birth of enlightenment may be no different. But let us see if my gut feeling pans out. Is the zodiacal poetry of this place reflected in its communal face? Let us observe the Liverpudlian face of this child and see what news we can read on it. First and foremost, I see a lovable and unconquerable community spirit full of enormously youthful energies, and I wonder if it was in the 1960s that the child beneath their homes first began to stir? I say this as it was from this same face that the Beatles first stepped out and thrilled the young of the world, and with them came a tidal wave of new and creative thinking. The whole atmosphere was colorful, youthful, and fresh. Never had there been a time before when the young could express themselves so creatively. It was as though after the long winter of the war years the psyche of the planet had vibrantly re-emerged and came singing back like the spring. For millions it was an enormously exciting time to be around and to drink in its freedom, and for many at that time Liverpool was its fountainhead. Without doubt, the young in the 60s were at the vanguard of a mini-leap in the perception of life. The suffocating values of the Victorians were finally washed away, and to be living at that moment upon the face of this child was the perfect location in which to reap the full benefit of what must have been in the air. I also detect an impish curl at the corner of Liverpool's mouth due to its own unique and warm brand of self-mocking humor, a humor with a happy knack of making light of that city's many social traumas. Yet when it needs to cry it does it openly, unashamedly, and from a massive heart. Here is a city whose collective psyche, I sense, has always sung of hope. Smiles are never too far behind the tears in this place. Sadly, some of these tears, in true Geminian fashion, are sometimes the result of self-inflicted wounds. Its own council very nearly financially crucified the city it supposedly loved and looked after, and remember the self-destructive riots in Toxteth. More pain flitted across this face of Gemini at the time of those horrendously twinned football crowd accidents, both causing world-wide shock. Hillsborough seemingly the reversed mirror of the earlier Juventus tragedy. Our Belgium's Heysel Stadium, it was alleged that it was Liverpool supporters who caused the crush which claimed the lives of so many supporters of Juventus, while at Hillsborough it was 96 Liverpool supporters who died, this time accidentally crushed by fellow fans. How strange then that it was Liverpool supporters, the bulk of them again youngsters, who lived or died at both venues, and these two disasters within but a few years of each other. And as much as I hate using the word unique, for one football club to be involved in two disasters like this in succession is a horror undoubtedly unique to Liverpool. Certainly this child of Albion has, in recent years, lost too many of its own children, and there are more examples than the ones I have just given. To my mind, Liverpool has had too large a share of anguish, for each incident detailed above I'm sure caused a flicker of pain across this babe's sensitive face. Pain that will likewise forever haunt the faces of the folk who live upon it, for this is still a tight-knit city. After each trauma, however, they seem to rise from the ashes, each time with an even stronger community spirit, perhaps for the sharing of their pain, taking every blow to its collective heart, but never letting it fester therein. Walk on, with hope in your heart, not only the anthem of one of its two football teams, but I think for the whole city. Of course, other cities, towns and villages hurt for many and varying reasons throughout all Britain, and certainly many more times so in other parts of the world. However, I feel that Liverpool, because of the ultra-sensitive location of where it sits in this zodiac, may act at times as the microcosm conscience of all who live upon this mirror of Albion, and for all I know perhaps of the rest of the world, too. If so, in the psyche of Liverpool maybe the conscience of us all, at times, is laid bare and bleeding. At other times, though, it is an example of mankind's aptitude for forgiveness and community spirit, or of seeing the funny side of life even in the face of adversity, that shines through as a lesson to all who observe this city's trials and tribulations. Maybe, then, we should look towards this city, For its people may be amongst the first to open their eyes upon this bright new age. So come on Liverpool, show us the way. Open your eyes and sing She Loves You, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because if the mother has chosen to sculpt her baby's face beneath your streets, she really must do. Hard to comprehend, I know, this whole cause and effect land mirror stuff, it certainly is for me. If, however, Albion is not the biggest freak that nature has ever thrown up, but is instead both the awesome product and proof of a knowing and purposeful creation, that has from the beginning made itself a receptacle in which our dreams may become landscaped realities, then surely too the same sensitivities must be open to the nightmares we have created for ourselves. And if like really does attract like, do those glittering dreams and acts of love attract a sympathetic resonance, and, by the same token, do those who carry no hope attract exactly that? And it may not only be individuals who are open to such subliminal traffic, but the collective psyche of an entire nation may also be affected by what it has, over generations, laid down upon the soul of its own landscape. But again, try convincing a guy in London's cardboard city to think lucky and he'll be lucky. I would agree, we are talking of one hell of a crazy theory here, and I am but sticking a naive toe into it. But when we get to Scorpio, we will be faced with more devastating evidence to the effect that the theory may not be so bizarre. Dissecting a little more of the word liver. We have already heard how Mary Cain found a place called Livermore upon the Glastonbury child and her reading into it as a sign for Christ, the liver of life, with which I vigorously concur. However, before we leave Liverpool in search of the rest of Albion's baby, let us just toy some more with that word, liver. Apart from its bodily functions, my dictionary tells me, the liver is the seat of emotion. I ask you, after all that I have just put to you, does not Liverpool admirably fit the bill? So what a perfect subtitle for this child's role in the land scheme of things, without doubt here could well be the emotional seer of all Albion. Here's another dictionary definition of liver, one who lives in a specified way. Surely Christ, and indeed all other masters, have come to show us how to live in a specified way and thus to live like never before. Why, even in death, Jesus was really showing us how to live, and soon upon Cumbria's heights I'll also show you how he dances off the cross so as to ram home his own ultimate message, that in a life on earth, we have a greater gift than even the angel Gabriel's wings. Albion sings no different message from its every stream and hillock. A song whose first and last verse is that Jesus did not come to die for our sins, because we'll die for those ourselves, but to show us how to be reborn instantaneously to the realization that it is in the living flesh, yes, right here in the present, that heaven is to be won. Find heaven on earth was for me his first and last verse. In Liverpool's Child we are shown by the mother herself just how we can push out of the dark and find ourselves in a paradise on earth. So see your own face smile back out of the sweet dirty tracks of Liverpool's bittersweet tears and hope that your eyes begin to open, and you perceive truths we've never dared contemplate, truths of the aware God, residing in every grain of sand, of the God residing in every man and woman, even though in us he is gagged and blindfolded. It all stemmed from a baby's cry. Before we trace out the lovely form that this baby presents as it lays in its lambswool fleece, see how the land has lovingly lain its child on the back of Ari's lamb, I would like to relate how my own eyes were opened one afternoon when I had foolishly accepted that I had documented all the flowers in this vast zodiacal garden. From the beginning I had never given a thought as to whether any of these giants had inland limbs, having always been totally convinced by the coastal template alone. However, it was late one spring afternoon that this babe cried out and, in an instant, showed itself, not only as a coastal head and arm, but also as an entire and beautifully crafted full figure. I would briefly like to relate that special moment of his finding, for it again illustrates much of the off-the-wall way in which this whole wonderful thing has dropped into my lap. I had, by the time of writing up Gemini, already finished the writing of the preceding 7 signs via my findings in the coastline. Only in Pisces did I suspect a headline deep inland. Though I had not bothered to pursue it on a map, I was again content with what the coast alone brilliantly indicated. That said, that full-figure depiction of Libra's dove should have tipped me off far sooner. Anyway, there I was looking at my map, and jotting down a few prominent place names upon the child's head, when I heard a baby crying somewhere in the busy street outside. Instinctively I looked out of my window and then back to the map where I saw, in a flash, a fluid set of unbroken lines which drew the entire inland body of Gemini's baby, looking so incredibly fetus-like. It was as though that baby's cry outside had, in a moment, uncannily cleared my vision, and out of that almighty tangle of roads, rivers, and cities the full and breathtaking babe of Albion also cried out to be found. I was astounded. Needless to say, within moments my pencil was charging excitedly around the map to catch what I'd seen, before it melted back into the maze. I must admit, though, to doubting whether that vision would unravel a second time to the demands of the pencil, or whether it would have to be remembered only as a lovely mirage on an otherwise uneventful afternoon. Nevertheless, 5 minutes later, reality or mirage, it was there for all to see. I also knew I had now no alternative but to record the entire coordinates of this vast giant, a giant task in itself, but my what an exciting one. But then, as usual, one thought led to another, an apprehension arose out of the clear spring blue inside my head like a great bank of cloud, and with it the daunting prospect that, if this figure was meant to be shown in its entirety, then so must all the others, and an estimated 1 year's work in completing the manuscript would be blown away into God only knew how many more to come. Tentatively I looked again at the other giants and you know the rest. Defining the body. Time now to retrace what that afternoon brought to bear. Chester marks his right elbow and from there the River Dee flows seawards drawing his raised forearm in its wake, Hoylake, Wallasey, and Birkenhead sit upon the closed fist and from here protrudes a sucked thumb, tipped by New Brighton. Please note that the angle of this forearm is a virtual carbon copy of the Glastonbury child, and I can only imagine that there must be an important reason for this unique feature. Mary Kane herself saw the same sharp right angle as being suggestive of a Mason's square, and deduced from it that it graphically illustrated the child as the son of the architect of the world. Whatever the reason, the sea obviously demanded it thus. Come back now to Chester and take the A54 to Northwich, giving us a lovely underarm. The River Mersey, or Mersey as I'd like to call it, washes the profile of the delicate face into shape along with the inside of the arm, before flowing into the throat. Hale marks the chin and Warrington his Adam's apple. Follow the coast round past Speke, in hope of a spoken word, also upon his chin, past Grassendale which is in the area of the mouth, and then on along the long noble nose, it seems to sniff the flowers in the festival gardens, which marks at the same time the profile of bustling Liverpool. Bootle marks the bridge of the nose, Crosby, by the cross, the forehead, perhaps in anticipation of the cross that this same head would one day lean against. After Crosby, the towns are left behind for a while as the coast flows north to draw the top of his head past Formby Hills and Southport. The back of his head is drawn by the River Ribble all the way down to Preston. Using the M6 from Preston, one can draw the rest of the back of his head and neck down to Manchester, which sprawls over his left shoulder, heading south to a baby's bottom and beyond. Leaving Manchester head now to Hazel Grove, then the A6 to Buxton. From Buxton let's forget about roads completely and let the River Dove do us proud. So after Buxton just go a short way along the A53 as though making for Flash, but just before, pick up the Dove and the county border line between Staffordshire and Derbyshire and follow the pair right down to Uttoxeter, and with that the smooth curve of the baby's bottom is complete. Look over your shoulder, too, and note the fabulous bump of his left elbow between Whaley Bridge and Buxton. Now take the A518 to Stafford, in the bend of the knee, and follow that inner curve around the town on the M6 which goes on to draw the calf muscle until junction 13. Here we need the A449 to Wolverhampton and we're crossing the M54, at junction 2 should hopefully bring us to a major roundabout right on the baby's heel. Head then to Sedgley, Wombourne, and thereafter to Bridgnorth upon his little toe. From Bridgnorth the A458 draws the outer silhouette of the other toes as far as Cressidge. Cross the fields now and walk along the River Severn to the A5 near Attingham Park to draw the tip of his big toe. As was writing this I suddenly realized that the child was actually dipping his toe into the River Severn, as does Taurus. This same river also separates the big toe from the next toe along on this foot. Where the 7 goes beneath the A5, turn towards Telford, here get the M54 to Tong at junction 3, then it's the A41 to Newport. Once at Newport, follow the line of the county boundary between Shropshire and Staffordshire northwest to Loggerheads on the A53. We have then outlined the shin of his left leg. Now it's on to Stoke, joining the M6 on the outskirts and following it to Sandbach. This motorway, from Loggerheads on the top of his knee to Stoke, marks out the top of his left leg, and from Stoke to Sandbach, his tummy. His chest from Sandbach to Northwich in the armpit is traced on the A533 and A530. We have not finished yet, though, for he really is colossal. Next, we trace his right leg. Start at Loggerheads on his left knee. Head for Hodnet on the A53, which marks his right knee. Carry on to Telford on the A442, where visually this right leg goes behind the raised left foot, and continue on that same road until the ankle appears. Go then on to Quat. From here it's all country lanes, first to Hampton, then Sutton, Billingsley, Stotston Farlow, and Hopton wafers on the tip of his right foot's big toe. Like the other big toe, it is delightfully tickled by a river, this time the Rhea, though, again, the 7, that veritable foot bath, washes across the bridge of this foot. Onwards we go. From Hopton wafers we will trace the rest of the toes by following the A4117 to Bewdley, then via Kidderminster to Hagley. Again I note another major roundabout on this heel, just as there is on the left heel. From Hagley take the A491 to Sedgley, where once more the ankle disappears behind the raised left heel. Lastly, the left arm. Now to trace the left arm, go back to Buxton, where that lovely cartoon bump of an elbow is. Take the A53 to Leek, which will draw the elbow down to the left wrist. His slightly folded hand is drawn from Leek to Stoke, but once there, head northwest to Kidsgrove, where his navel is. Proceed to Congleton on top of the hand, though be sure to take the A536 to Macclesfield to trace the bend in his arm. From here we draw the last part of this upper arm by going on the A523 for a short way. Then taking the A538 to Wilmslow. Carry on to junction 6 on the M56, and this will take us into the armpit and completion of our journey through the earthly constellation of Gemini. By the way, and I mention this for obvious reasons, there are 3 other places on this sign with Kid starting the name: Kidsgrove, Kidmore Green, and Kidderminster. Note: in esoteric healing based upon chakras, the kidneys are looked upon as the area of the body where are kept the emotional traumas of childhood. Bang on for this sign. And his eye? That left eye flickers beneath Liverpool's suburbia, where thousands must sleep nightly, unknowingly, upon its covered brilliance. Well, I'd guess that the line that follows its closed lid would be the 506 from Kirkby into the city. Aintree could be the pupil beneath it. Our story note. This area is known as Seaforth. Did a saint see or sense it too? St. Patrick in the 7th century must surely have sensed Albion's slumbering babe when sailing to these shores from Ireland. Hear him again tell it as it was, chief of 13 gold and silver idols, it bowed its head westwards, for its face was from the south. Who can say this is not Gemini described exactly, along with the rest of Albion giants? Now I know Mary Cain has equated the above reference to the saint's first sighting of the Glastonbury child, but I now feel safe in claiming it as pertaining to this greater child of Albion. What is more, I would call into question Mary's assessment that the Glastonbury child bows its head westwards. According to her own compass setting, next to her illustration of the child, it is to the south that its head lolls, whereas Albion's own towering child, near 100 miles tall, does indeed bow its head directly westwards, lolling it sleepily into the hushaby waves of the Irish Sea over which St. Patrick sailed, and thus, more than likely, looking up to the Colossus babe from the south, just as written. But shouldn't Gemini be the sign of twins? Yes, but I feel this extraordinary picture in a landscape asks us to consider rather twinning as the vital key word in the deciphering of this solitary star child's contribution to the overall topographical message. Under Capricorn, we touched upon the possibility that this miracle was, in part, perhaps urging mankind to rejoin all broken opposites, to reclaim the sight that without the goddess, the feminine force, the god, the masculine force is weakened, that without the black negative, the white positive may drift out of control, that if the spiritual is lost, the material becomes hollow, and if mankind does not embrace nature as a part of his own intimate makeup, then the writing on these headlands of Albion seems to spell out that he could be doomed. Thus, the land might be telling us that to remarry the yin to the yang, in the understanding of all men, will be to cause the rebirth of a new and wiser mankind, perhaps even overnight. And then wonders would work, and what healing we could carry out to both the planet and ourselves by working in tandem with this now proved to be God-infused nature, rather than against it. I then consider this Geminian child, this icon of the embryonic Christ consciousness asleep in us all, to represent the chance of a mystic retwinning, if you like, a sacred marriage, of the many sundered opposites stored in the intellectual core of man. But then again, never forget that the land has willed it that as a fetus its eyes are shown tightly closed. For them to open, the child must be born. Open your eyes, must be the message. However, Geminians may still argue that their sign is of the twins, so where's the other one? Well, the land has obliged. So walk this way to the Griffin, although I repeat that it will be twinning, or the issue of sacred duality, that will still be the key that unlocks the message that this northwest corner of Britain has writ large upon it. Gemini. Unfortunately, the underground swells seem not interested in giving our child a lower half, unlike the surface currents. But how those Triassic mudstones and sandstones bring a pool of hushed stillness amongst the swirling mayhem so as not to disturb that still sleeping child shape that swims there.
Let